This presentation examines the widespread claim that the federal government of Canada is forcing a nationwide digital ID system on Canadians as a tool for monitoring and surveillance. In the next slides, I will walk through what the claim asserts, what the verified evidence shows, how federal digital identity initiatives actually work, and why optional digital credentials have generated concern and confusion. The goal of this presentation is to provide clear, fact-based analysis rooted entirely in the sources listed at the end. The claim presented is that the Canadian federal government is forcing a nationwide digital ID on Canadians for the purpose of monitoring and surveilling the population. It suggests a mandatory system, centrally controlled, imposed without consent, and designed to track citizen activity across government and daily life. This script evaluates that claim against the evidence provided in federal documentation, Privacy Commissioner guidance, and independent analysis. The answer is no. It is not true that the federal government is imposing a mandatory digital ID on Canadians for surveillance purposes. Although the federal government is developing digital identity platforms, these initiatives are designed to be optional, consent-based, and governed by strict privacy protections. They do not amount to a compulsory surveillance system. While digital identity systems can raise legitimate privacy risks if poorly designed or misused, the evidence shows that Canada's current initiatives are structured around choice, user control, and limitations on data sharing, not around forced enrollment or real-time monitoring. What is actually happening is the development of digital identity tools meant to simplify access to federal services. The Canadian Digital Service under the Treasury Board Secretariat is building GC Sign-In and GC Issue and Verify, which allow Canadians to prove their identity once instead of repeatedly entering credentials for each service. These tools also allow people to hold digital versions of documents such as work permits or boating licenses in addition to their physical copies. Importantly, federal documentation explicitly states that these platforms are optional. Canadians may continue accessing government services in person or by phone. Privacy commissioners across Canada emphasize that digital identity initiatives must meet high standards of privacy, transparency, and accountability, and the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada notes that Canadians expect digital ID systems to remain optional and centered around user control. Some believe that a surveillance system is being imposed because digital identity naturally raises fears about tracking, centralized data collection, or unauthorized monitoring. Concerns rise from misunderstandings about how credentials are stored, who controls the data, and whether governments or third parties can track users across services. Polling indicates that the government has tested public attitudes toward government-issued digital credentials, and some provincial initiatives, such as Quebec's Bill 82, use terminology like national digital identity. Even in those cases, however, legislation states that the system does not replace physical documents and does not force citizens to use digital credentials. Misinterpretation of these developments contributes to the mistaken belief that a mandatory federal surveillance system exists. Understanding the no surveillance caveat is important because even though the system is optional, any digital identity ecosystem carries inherent risks. If not designed properly, systems could enable excessive data capture, tracking of user behavior, or expanded access by government or private entities. The federal and provincial privacy commissioners explicitly warn about these risks and demand strong safeguards to prevent such outcomes. For this reason, government language emphasizes consent, choice, and user control over which pieces of information are shared and with whom. The absence of mandatory enrollment, combined with privacy by design requirements, reinforces that Canada's current system is not a surveillance tool, even though its structure still warrants ongoing public oversight. In conclusion, the federal government is not currently imposing a digital ID on Canadians for surveillance purposes. Existing digital identity initiatives are optional and developed with stated privacy protections. However, because digital identity inherently involves sensitive personal information, continuous vigilance, transparency, and strong oversight remain essential to prevent potential future misuse. Public debate on privacy and accountability is not only legitimate but necessary to ensure that digital identity in Canada remains a tool of convenience rather than a mechanism of unwanted monitoring. This slide summarizes the sources used to support this analysis. The Government of Canada's Trusted Access to Digital Services documentation provided details on how GC Sign-In and GC Issue and Verify function and emphasized the optional nature of federal digital ID systems. The Digital Identification and Authentication Council of Canada contributed insight into public expectations around consent and data control within digital identity frameworks. The Office of the Auditor General of Canada report offered independent verification that digital validation systems are service access tools rather than surveillance mechanisms. Finally, the Norton Rose Fulbright analysis of Quebec's Bill 82 clarified how provincial digital identity systems work and reinforced that citizen participation is not mandatory. Viewers can pause here to view the full citations and follow links to the source material. There is a lot more fact-checking information you can view.